First question's about redistricting, because I'm very involved in that. I know that.
I saw your opinions on all the appointments. It was pretty fascinating.
And I got some back channel from certain people in the speaker's office. Actually, here I'll switch my question up, but it gets to the thrust of my argument, which is I was going to ask you where you saw what is the end result, what's perfect for you. But part of that is, and it was somebody off the record saying to me, Speaker Cannon would rather have very minimal, but he will accept some losses. He realizes that you're not going to be able to retain an 81-seat majority. In fact, there's a Stanford survey that says you would only be down to, that Republicans would still lead even with 5 and 6. That 5 and 6 is not a silver bullet for Democrats. But the theory is he would take a minimum amount of losses if it meant there was no intervention or minimal intervention from the Supreme Court and the Justice Department and so forth. So where do you see, what does it look like at the end of the day for you? When do you think that would be, when is it ideal for that to be done? And you don't have to comment directly on an off the record comment about Speaker Cannon, but is there some credence to that, avoiding third-party intervention in the redistricting process?
I think anything that is talking about what the end game is on redistricting is premature.
Okay.
And I know that may not be the answer you want to hear, but it's the truth, because here's why. We have to spend the next 3.5 months going to just about every area of the state and hearing public testimony. And we don't know what that public testimony is going to say. And whatever maps you draw, you certainly want to make sure that they're factoring in what people actually said they were looking for, because if you don't, you're going to have problems with the courts. So our thought is, if we, number one, make the process the most open and transparent it's ever been, which I think we've even heard from you through the social media, through our website, Florida Redistricting, from the My District Builder website, this process is more tangible, it's more open, and it's more accessible to the general public than it's ever been. But aside from that, after we go through that process, then you have to go through the process of actually drawing maps. And when you say, what's the end game, what am I looking for? There's no magic number, there's no, I can't tell you what the state should look like. What I can tell you is, if we can do it and do it by following the law and making sure that we get it right the very first time, the court looks at it and says, you know what? The legislature gave their best good faith effort here. They did it the right way. They were open. They were transparent. It looks like they followed the law to the greatest extent that they could. Looks good to me. I mean, to me, we want maps to be drawn by elected officials who are accountable to the public, not by people, not by the judges. They have a role to play in this process, and they certainly will play it. But my hope is to do the maps right the very first time.
You embrace technology. I mean, to your credit, probably more so than. In fact, I kind of joke, I'm like, where's the Senate on this side? I mean, I've never seen it where coming back from the 92 and 2002 process, the House is way out in front. I mean, way out in front. I mean, does that present problems for you? Do you get any pushback from, or are they just happy to get the help? I mean, it kind of looks like the redistricting committee, which is the House redistricting committee, is like the overall redistricting committee, but it's really still the House. I mean, it's...
Well, I mean, we've made a good faith effort, like I said, to make it open and to embrace technology. We feel like, there are millions and millions of people that are, participating in Twitter and Facebook, billions now across the world. But in Florida, that's how a lot of people get their information. A lot of people aren't getting their information in the newspaper. They're not getting their information on TV. They're getting it online. And so why would we not take advantage of that medium? I think you'll see both the House and the Senate kind of continue to up our game. And we're always looking for new opportunities and new ways to be even more creative and more tech savvy. So I think the Senate's catching up to us, and I think that you'll see us working together in tandem, because at the end of the day, it's not just the House maps. We've got to pass House maps, Senate maps, and congressional maps, and we both have to do it. So if we're not both communicating with the public, it's not going to work. So
it was almost interesting. One of the things I brought out to Alex Kelly was I said, this is the perfect opportunity for crowdsourcing, where
that's right.
I roll out the ball, and we've done that now on our website, Inside the Lines, and with Nicholas Ruiz, who's put out, here's a map. And okay, somebody else then can come back behind it and say, all right, you're 90% there, but what you really need, you're not familiar with that part of, and in this case, the person that wrote it was not familiar with Tampa Bay. It's like, you need to conclude this because that's more natural and so forth. So, I mean, that's one of the things that really, the technology on it is amazing, that people are going to be able to, like we said, roll out the ball, and you're going to be able to, put out maps. Which, it was one of the questions I wanted to ask. One of the things about the technology some of your colleagues, like Matt Gaetz, is all over Twitter.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and he is.
He's keeping us all entertained.
He is.
in the process.
And I mean, so talk about that. You know, what do you think about, you know, there's people like Matt Gaetz, there's people like Jimmy Patronis, Seth McKeel, Paula Dockery, they're putting it out there in a different way than, they're not just saying they're headed to this meeting, they are actually putting out some opinion on there that is interesting. I mean,
I think it's based on everybody's individual personality. You know, there are some people who are more reserved, who just want to put on, hey, I went and spoke to the Chamber of Commerce today, had a great time. You know, they're almost like an FYI to their followers. There's other people who are constantly trying to come up with new, innovative ways to almost entertain the followers and at the same time keep them informed. And I think Matt Gaetz obviously has done that in a very creative way. A lot of people enjoy reading his stuff. I enjoy reading what he puts out there. But look, in this process, if anything that we've learned in the last week is that social media can be dangerous as well. And you've got to make sure that what you're putting out there, you have to make sure that the information that you're sharing is appropriate. We certainly have a congressman up in Washington, D.C. who has learned the hard way on that you can get burned in social media. But if you're doing it right, and if you're using it as a medium to allow people to get to know you, because I think that's one of the biggest things. When you meet political officials, nobody feels like they know you. They're like, who is this guy? Who's Will Weatherford? Who's Matt Gaetz? Who are all these people? But if you use social media as a way to give them a more personal feeling for who you are and what you actually do in your spare time when you're not sitting in a committee, they're like, I kind of like that guy now that I know who he really is. So it's a great tool. Some people use it more than others, but I think it's part of the future of campaigning.
Do you think that there'll come a day where you are speaker and you have to issue guidelines maybe to your members? I mean, do you worry about that in a way? Or, I mean, even maybe proactively?
Well, I think, look, you always want to treat others with respect. And whether someone is putting out a tweet, whether they're sending an email, whether they are making a comment on the floor, you should always be respectful of your colleagues and of your constituents. And so if anybody ever breaks that, then yeah, I mean, to me, at the end of the day, the ultimate accountability is the voters. So if someone's doing something that's inappropriate or using social media to do something that's inappropriate, they're going to be dealt with, and the voters will take care of that. But yeah, I do think that there's a decorum that the Florida House should bring, and that should spread across everything you do. When you're a Florida House member, you're not just a representative of your district, you're the representative of an entire chamber and a reflection of that chamber, and you should act accordingly.
That kind of brings up a point. You're going to be, the ascendancy is always the most powerful time for a person going into the speakership. This session, going into it, and usually your first session, at least historically. What are you doing in preparation for that? Are you reading books, different books? I mean, another question kind of along those lines. Obviously, you've got your father-in-law to rely upon, but who are some other Floridians maybe that you take a page from? So what are you doing between now and next session, and then after that to be fully prepared to be speaker? Are there things that you admire in Dean Cannon, and things maybe you may differ, that you may change the tone on when you take over the gavel?
Well, those are a lot of questions. I'm going to try to hit on all of them. The first thing is, Alan Bentz has been a great mentor for me. Obviously, being a family member, he's my father-in-law, so we're very close on a personal level. But to have someone who was a good speaker, frankly a great speaker, to look to and ask for advice, and that his advice is relevant to today because it was just very recent that he was the Speaker of the House, is a great advantage and something that I utilize quite often. I do read a lot, but instead of waiting till the last minute to prepare for this, what I think to believe is preparing since the very beginning. I went to go see Governor Bush a few months after I got elected the first time, and he had just left as governor, and I drove down to Miami and asked him if I could get 30 minutes of his time, which he gave to me. And the governor basically said, look, what you need to do if you really want to have an understanding of Florida, if you want to understand the dynamics of the economy, you need to go on a wandering tour. You need to go spread across the state of Florida, spend time with opinion leaders, spend time with business leaders, get an understanding of how Florida works and what it's doing. But he said, go on a wandering tour. Make sure that you understand the dynamics of the state of Florida. And so that's really what I've been doing for 5 years. So I mean, as opposed to waiting to the last minute to do that, I tried to do that really early on. And lastly, and Speaker Cannon, you asked me, I think it's been the most organized Florida House that I've ever seen. I've never seen the Florida House of Representatives be more organized and function and have the trains run on time than it is now. Every speaker has their own style. Every president has their own way that they run the chamber. But I got to tell you, I really admire the way that he has done that, and it's allowed us to take on big, bold policy.
Talk about what it means to be a representative from West Central Florida, where, you know, in the last couple of months there's a little bit of a division inside the Republican Party between West Central Florida and seemingly the rest of the state, but there's divisions over maybe immigration reform and so forth. Do you feel like the representatives here are they honest Republicans, or is there a need for more conservative leadership inside this area? You know, talk about that a little bit. You know, the dichotomy between West Central Florida Republicans and maybe the Republicans from, say, Jacksonville or something like that. That seems.
Well, I think we're unique. I mean, the Tampa Bay region is unique in general. The citizens and the people. Usually, the representatives you have are a reflection of the citizens they represent, and so 9 times out of 10. A person's positions and an agenda that they believe in and a philosophy they have is probably going to be a reflection of the type of people who sent them up there to represent them. And so I think it's important to have diversity up in Tallahassee. I do think we have great conservative leadership in this area, frankly.
Okay.
I think you've got great people like Danny Young, who I think is an exciting member. We've got Jeff Brandes right here in St. Petersburg, who I think has a tremendously bright future in the Florida House or whatever he decides to do. You've got people like Richard Corcoran, who's also a freshman from the same class. I do think that we've got a good nucleus of conservative members, but you know, not everybody considers themselves to be a hardcore conservative, and that's okay. I think it's all right to have diversity. I don't know if West Central Florida is different than the rest of the state. I just think maybe we have a more diverse network here. You go to other parts of the state, and maybe there's more like-minded folks in one region. Here, we think as a unit when it comes to Tampa Bay, and we work together to make sure that our region is represented appropriately. But when it comes to policy, there are some differences of opinion, and I think that's healthy.
Last question: who's the best athlete in your family?
My brother Steven.
Okay.
The youngest. It's always the youngest.
It's always the youngest.
If he works half as hard as my brother Drew did,
Yeah.
he'll be an NFL quarterback.
Really?
But, yeah.
Okay.
But he's just got he doesn't have the work ethic yet.
Where's he at right now?
Cincinnati.
Okay. Okay.
And he's got a lot of potential.
All right. Fantastic. Well, I appreciate it.
Thank you very much.